Well, good morning and welcome to my brand new podcast, Trauma Recycled. It's rooted in rising. And I developed this podcast because in addition to my book, that's me talking and me sharing my journey, but I really want to share all of the magical people that are out there with all of you. And I am just so blessed to run across paths with just the most amazing folks ever. So I want to introduce you to Sivani, and she is just so incredible and multifaceted. It's actually quite difficult for me to describe her, but she describes herself, and I really love this, spiritually curious, and I absolutely that just like hits me in the heartstrings. Very empowering. You study inner intelligence, emotional intelligence. You're an Ayurveda life and wellness coach. I find holistic healing very fascinating. I admit I don't know much about it. And I do know that in talking with my friends and colleagues and people that I run across, people are very curious about that and just don't know where to begin. And you have this explorer's library that I'm really excited for you to talk about and share, and also your book, which I have read and like is amazing, just an incredible journey. And thank you so much for sharing that. But I'd really like to start out with you just talking about, your what is it that you do?
Yeah, so at this time in my life, what it is that I'm engaging in is a little bit more of guide, like tour guide, if you will. I've spent um, the last 2 decades of my life exploring the Eastern traditions, yoga, meditation, and now Ayurveda, which is the that natural healing modality. And what I've discovered is that there's amazing benefits in all of that information, yet it really needs to be something that is explored, is discovered by the individual, what works, what doesn't work, what resonates with each individual. The whole premise of the Eastern tradition is all about inner intelligence. It's about connecting with that knowing inside of yourself and moving from that place. And when we do, then we're typically in the flow. We're having more of those, what would you call them? Maybe peak experiences, just very naturally because everything is lined up. It's in tune, it's in flow, and we are fulfilling the the underlying desires so that by the time we get to the ends of our lives, we're not laying there full of regret. Instead,
Mm.
we've done, we've satisfied, we've fulfilled. And so that looks very different for each individual. So basically, much of what it is that I do is help people explore that, turn away from dogma, idealism, all of that kind of stuff, and start turning into what is important and exploring that without judgment. So I like to do that,
Mm.
like I said, as a guide through coaching, but also because I have so many years of experience, there may be times when there's some teaching or some consulting or things like that. But mostly I like my clients to be in charge and leading the journey. If I've traveled
Wow.
to Japan, and I've been to Japan a million times, it can be really enjoyable to have somebody brand new come in and say, well, what do you want to look at? Where do you want to go?
Mm.
All of the
That's great. I love that. That analogy really is very understandable. That's awesome. And and I know that you and I have chatted before, and when we can get to that place of inner trust and the guide and the North Star that we've got inside, I mean it's a journey to arrive, but wow, is that like the best compass of all?
And it
Mm.
also is the foundation of any of our mm, health woes. So our
Mm.
physical health, our mental health, all of these, the emotional challenge that most of us are under, because we live in such a high-paced, high-fast,
Mhm.
high-fast,
Yeah.
high-paced, fast environment that's kind of constantly demanding, that the more that we tune into that inner intelligence, our purpose, our meaning, the more that even our physical bodies come back into a place of balance. So again, there's a lot of people that would focus on, well, let's take this herb, let's take this supplement,
Mm.
we have to do it like this. You must be on macronutrients. You must eat, vegan, or you must eat carnivore, all of these external things. And yet, what I've seen through playing around with various different individuals is that there's value in all of those approaches.
Mm.
However, those approaches don't all fit every single person. So that's where we need to discover, like, if you're going to sit down and eat, what makes you happy? And then what is your body responding to, so that we can bring those things together. All of that guidance that comes from listening and paying attention to ourselves, again, because we're so busy doing all of these other sorts of things.
Yeah, right, right. I just listened to one of your podcasts and you made a really amazing comment that I had never considered. Eat food that feels alive and fresh. And I sat there and I'm like, okay, so the middle of the grocery store where things are processed and packaged, there's nothing fresh in there, but like you just touched on, we all live this really quick, fast-paced life. And the typical excuse is, I don't have time or the money to eat healthy. How would you address that, to somebody? What would you say if that was, where they are?
Well, the interesting thing is that when you do start eating alive and fresh, most of the time, the what you're eating is satiates the hunger. It actually builds volume, builds bulk, which is great for your digestion, all of those things. So you actually eat less, even
Hmm.
if those items cost more. But all of the packaged, the dry things have that tendency of creating more hunger. Also,
Mm.
things when we're eating a lot of the packaged processed foods, they are also extremely dehydrating to your physiology. So, you hear people that are like, you have to drink gallons and gallons of water every day. Well, that's not actually true if you're eating natural, healthy, fresh foods, that they're packed full of moisture and all of the nutrients and the fibers again. So that's one of the things that I do think is interesting, since I've moved all of my food choices in that, and then also watched my husband. He's on the carnivore diet, and he'll eat a big steak and eggs meal, one, during the day, and that's usually midday. And then on the either beginning or the tail end, those are very light things. It could be that he has fruit for his dinner, something like that. So even the
Wow.
amount of things that we're eating is much, much less when we're eating whole foods. It's just the way it
Yeah.
is.
I think that's a mind shift, right? It sounds to me like, I mean, I think, most of us, right? I was raised with, you have three regular big meals a day. And there was supposed to be a mix of some like family of foods that I studied in school that made zero sense to me, in every single meal. And so our plates, our dinner plates are huge in our country, right? And then you start to think about the tools that we've been handed are very similar to the tools that we continue with.
Yep.
So if somebody comes to you and they're just like, hey, you know what? I'm feeling really unhealthy and imbalanced. I mean, I'm sure there's a process behind that, but what do you find is the typical response to somebody in that place?
So, in fact, that is why I have moved away from promoting myself as like a health coach,
Mm.
because typically when individuals come, food is one of the hardest things to change. And that
Mm.
is why we're attracted to these various different diets, and we get on them and we do it great for like a month, maybe 2 months, maybe 4 months. But all of a sudden we realize we're back in the same um, loop that like you said, that we were in.
Mm.
Um, and there, oftentimes the reason for that is all of our emotional triggers all around food. So, as you mentioned, if you were raised in the South, you're probably eating a lot of maybe fried
Yep.
foods. I mean, that's just the way it goes. If you were raised in the
Yep.
North, maybe you're eating something a little bit different, because
Right.
of the culture. So there's the culture around you, and then
Sure.
our families do things different, as you were mentioning.
Mm.
If a family was didn't have a lot of resources, for example. They may have had a lot of things given to them. And when foods are given, typically they
Mm,
are the things that can be preserved. So one of the best ways to go about that is start looking at the interconnection. And different than what a lot of psychology or all of those things, which are beneficial and sometimes is very important if there's a lot of stress around those particular habits, but beginning to look at those and then reassess and connect
mm,
again. How often are you asked when you put that in your mouth, what does it feel like when it's in your mouth? What does it feel like 30 minutes after you ate it? What does it feel like the next day after you ate it? And when we start getting curious about what's going on and then listening to the responses in our body, it's much, much easier. How many of you or listeners in your youth maybe had a wild party or something like that, and you drank too much peach schnapps? I'm just going to throw one, and could have been Fireball
yeah.
or these other drinks. I don't know. I don't drink anymore, but uh, and it was a fun night. But then the next day, or maybe even
Mm,
later in the night, you are suffering because your body is getting rid of it. It's expelling all of that, and in as many ways as possible, right? You never
yeah.
touch that peach schnapps again. It
Yeah.
was impactful enough. So instead of looking at this is the right way you should eat and this you should do it like this, that if we start really paying attention, if it works for you to eat processed foods and you have no negative side effects, go ahead, dive in. You might be that
Yeah.
person who lives to 110 smoking cigarettes and eating bacon. It happens. People do live that way. And you may be more likely to do that if that's what's in tune and in flow and right for your physiology. So again, stepping away from the idealistic, this is the right way, this is the best way for everybody. Our dharmas are different. A dharma means
Hmm.
life path, our purpose. So some of us may need to do particular things, and that's going to work just fine. And somebody else is like they do all of the right things and then they're still feeling yucky. So addressing
Yeah.
that in a different way of maybe has nothing to do with food at all. That was the part that amazed me is I
Mm,
actually had the physical challenge, and I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease, and it was a lot of years before
mm,
I knew that that's what it was. So I got all excited about, I'm going to eat healthy. I'm going to do all of the right
yeah.
things. And the
Yeah.
more that I did it, the sicker I got. It was really, really bad. And I was so confused. But what I discovered is that, and this is true of a lot of type A individuals, that when you get hyper focused on something, that essentially that's what you're eating. You're eating all of the stress. It doesn't matter what food is in there. And instead,
Wow.
I had to reassess the attitude. Was I focusing on my business desires or whatever, my passions? If I was
Mm,
studying something, was I studying while I was sitting down and eating?
mm.
Because again, that's what I was eating, is all the stress. It didn't matter what the food was.
That's amazing. That is amazing. And I know myself, I will rewind this and go back to those questions because that was probably the greatest bit of information I've ever heard. Because you're right, nobody ever asks, how does that feel in your body
Mhm.
before, during, and after? That is huge. That's something that I had never, ever, ever considered as I'm wolfing down macaroni and cheese and a hot dog. I do feel like crap after, but you just kind of let it go by. You let
Mhm.
it go by. And then when I eat a really healthy salad, yeah, I do feel better after, but I'm not acknowledging it. I'm not really learning from that. I love that. That was just so helpful. So, yeah, I mean, for everybody listening, that's something I'm going to highly recommend you do. Rewind this, write down those questions and do that because that's huge. I really appreciate that.
Yeah,
That's
and on top of that, so if you're getting in that habit of asking yourself, and then you realize that, like, if you aren't going to judge yourself, right? You're just going to let yourself do whatever it is that you desire to do, because that's another form of stress when you withhold. So if you allow yourself to observe yourself while you're eating, after, and all of those things, and you notice, wow, I feel heavy and I
Mm,
don't feel good. So why am I making choices repeatedly? Why, when I already feel yucky, do I reach to something that's going to make me feel worse?
mm,
Why am I doing that? Do I need to keep doing that? All of those sorts of things. The more curious, again, that we become like little scientists of our own lives, then we can make choices. Well, I felt heavy and I wanted to, dive into that experience a little bit more. One of my most powerful teachers in when studying meditation, I used to want to control my emotions a lot. And he would just say, I've never experienced that to ever work. If you're in a safe place and you can just dive into those emotions
yeah.
with curiosity and roll around in those emotions, you'll learn a whole lot more about
Mm,
yourself and what those emotions are there to tell you. So same sort of
right,
thing. Sometimes we want to dive into yuck and feel yuck, and that's okay. I mean,
right.
we have the freedom to do whatever it is that we want. So again, even that takes off of that pressure to be perfect, to do everything right.
Yes.
And then we can
Yeah.
just start making choices on, well, this is just what I want to do right now.
Yes, right, right. Sometimes, that self audit, that's the beginning of the journey. Like I need to feel where I am right now in order to identify it and decide what direction I want to go. I mean, that's very important. I love that. I love your modality of learning. I really, really do. And I'd love for you to share with us, like, how did you get into this? Why?
Yeah, so for me, all of it started, well, I started a lot of my exploration of the Eastern tradition because my body was in a lot of pain. It
Mm,
would take me years to understand where the root of all of that pain was, which was a traumatic event in I was 12 years old and my 18-year-old sister ended her life. The loss of my sister was one thing, but more than that, I lost an idyllic family structure.
mm,
My both of my parents withdrew into themselves. They needed to go through their experience of what all of that loss, the grieving and all of that. I was in a very large family, and oftentimes where I was at is that was overlooked. My friends were told by their parents to give me space and give me time. I was 12 years old, and I just needed connection. I needed something to
oh,
be there for me. So all of that got kind of shoved down, and I started behaving or learning how to live my life not facing the emotional experience. And I became very high functioning. I was capable of doing a lot of things and telling myself that everything was fine. So, in during my pregnancies, my second pregnancy and my third, that's where my physical body couldn't handle all of what I was holding
mm,
in. So again, that's something that I've learned even later in my own physical healing journey is that all of the mental stress and the emotional control that I was doing at that time was more than what my body could handle. And the pregnancies being a greater demand on my body, that's where my body was just calling out for all of this help. Yeah, and I got to notice that, for example, because I was pregnant, because then I wanted to nurse, there was nothing that 24 years ago that the doctors had to give me. I had signs of rheumatoid arthritis, so another autoimmune, and they couldn't do anything. And so my sister returned from college, kind of for in my mind, very hippie, all of that kind of stuff. And she said, try yoga. Pff, fine, I will do anything. I'm so desperate. So I joined a elderly yoga class once a week. And in 9 months, I had zero pain. There's just no pain left.
wow.
And the doctors were amazed. They couldn't figure it out. But it was the first time that I was being led to
Mm,
look inside myself and start paying attention.
yeah.
I did that in a small way. There was tons and tons of control and all of that for years later. Essentially, that's all of those years, all of those decades are the things that helped me create something very concise that makes it very easy. So you don't have to do yoga if you have no attraction to
Mhm.
being on a yoga mat and stretching and doing those things. You don't have to do that. That's not the solution. Meditation wasn't the solution. It gave me so much, and it taught me how to connect with my inner intelligence and develop that relationship with my
Mhm.
self, with my higher self. All of that. I learned how to do that, but you don't have to do that,
Mm.
because that inner intelligence exists within you from the moment that you take your physical body. It's there if you listen. And I spent 13 years not listening.
Yeah.
Oh, that's we can use meditation practices and all of those if they're resonating. And then, again, through my studies in Ayurveda, that's where I really, really connected with all of those things were teaching me, was to just begin listening to myself, develop a very healthy relationship with myself, and
Mm.
start creating. And that was one of the things that you said, when we switch from I am the victim of this, I have no control, to where I'm just making decisions. And
Yeah.
this is the decision I'm going to make. I understand what the consequence is, and I'm going to make it anyway. There's a ton of power in that.
There is, there is. That's so profound, right? When you reach that space, it's really a space to sit in for a minute and just go, wow, because it's hard to get to that. It's not easy to get to that. It sounds like you just had the most amazing teachers all around you in your process of learning. Can you share a little bit about that? How you found your way?
Yeah, so one of the things that there were a lot of people that supported me around all of this kind of stuff. I even remember before I got into my meditation practice, I had gone into, oh, I was going to heal my eyesight. I was going to correct my vision because that would mean something to me. I really felt like that was so true. So I found a coach and I began working with him. And I remember hearing so loudly, he is not the one. And I thought that that was the weirdest thing at that time. I was like, "Pfft, okay, I wasn't looking for a one, I just want to heal my eyesight or whatever." Interestingly enough, it was something that about a year later, when I started doing my meditation practice, I was really ready to start diving into all of the pain and then the spiritual break that I had had. I'd come from a really
Mhm.
religious family. That loss of my sister at that time broke all of that for me. So I was really trying to heal that. And what I created at that time was two teachers. One was the one that I would claim as my teacher, and he is a male, but there was a female byproduct, or like pair in that. And he did this beautiful way of always supporting me. Whatever I wanted to do, whenever I wanted to do it, that was fine. That was a part of my exploration. As long as I was being safe and all of those things, everything was on the table. And
Mm.
the feminine aspect was not. So it was kind of
Mm.
reverse for me. Earlier in my life, the masculine energy was very controlling. Um, and the feminine was much more loving and supporting. So it was a reverse. And the thing that I thought was very interesting that I have also extracted out of this is that as as women, we can also take on that kind of dogmatic, guru type of form and be very
Yeah.
controlling and decide for the other, or we can, be this loving, safe space that allows us to move and then become very balanced, become very confident in our relationship with our inner world. And, I didn't really realize the beauty of this one that I would rail against and fight. And I was always like, but it is one of those things that I created so beautifully to help me see what I didn't want to do and what I did want to do and
Mm.
how I want to support others as that came for me, because I feel like I pushed supporting others away for a long time while I
Mm.
figuring this out. I was very, very nervous to hold that space and that
Mm.
responsibility of supporting another. So it was a really, really beautiful way. And I guess that's a long way of saying that when we're ready, that teacher just arrives. It just does. And it comes in whatever form we
Yeah.
need at that particular time. So now the teacher looks like many, many different things. The teacher to me, or for me in my spiritual development and just life development, could be the client, that is
Yeah.
now a teacher, all of those things, that or an animal, or a garden space. All of these are the teacher when we become curious and the student of life. There's so much
Oh, yeah. a
at all times.
hundred percent. Totally understand that. And that's the beauty of each other, is that when we connect with an open heart, we always learn. You can't help but learn. I mean, I think the key is really to have that open heart, and the open mind. But yeah, and I mean, I get my greatest teacher was my little dog, hands down. There's no doubt about it. And it's just something that's really, it's difficult to understand at the time that you are learning. It's sometimes you just take it for granted, or little kids, they're magic. They're magic, man. If you just sit, you could really learn so much from a little kid in like a minute. If you really choose to, the freedom that they have, the beauty that they have, they're completely unbiased, they're completely non-judgmental. Everybody is amazing in their world. Just a minute, and you can grasp some of that and just bottle it up. I mean, it's an amazing place to be. I love that. I just love how you learn, and I love how you share. And I really want to make sure that we save some time for how can people find themselves? What is it that they need to do? What is it that you offer, and how can you help?
Yeah, so I feel like that one is a growing and evolving thing for me because, again, creating different vessels or what am I looking for? Not experiments, but kind of like an experiment, like facilitating that
Mm,
journey, that exploration. So one of the easiest ways is, and the least expensive way that I support others, is I have something called an explorer's library. And the reason or the purpose behind that is there's 6 rooms of wellness in my library. It's meant to be a quiet space. So people always ask me, well, why didn't you do this on social media? And the reason is it is meant to be a place like the libraries of old, where you would go in and you'd start pulling the books of interest off the shelf for you. So one of the ways that I facilitate that is that I bring in other experts. And this serves 2 purposes. Again, that I may not be the somebody for everybody. I may be just that tour guide for a moment. And in that, get to expose individuals to amazing individuals in that library. And there is a wide array of individuals that are coming in there. So that's one part. But then what the library does is it helps build up to the nuggets of wisdom that expert brings in. We get to listen to our expert, and then we get to reflect. So it's a week-long journey, if you will, into our self-reflection, but also listening and hearing other ideas, opening ourselves, because oftentimes we can't change without getting curious and without exposing ourselves to other concepts outside of our, like you were talking about earlier, how are we ever going to experience food different if we don't explore different foods and
mhm.
different cultures and all of those things? Then these things naturally start to dissolve, and we question, we change them. So that's kind of the premise of that. It is meant to be something that you get in the habit weekly. So it's a new topic each week, but you get in this
Mm,
habit of self-reflection, and not all day long, because that's something that will exhaust you as well. When you spend a lot of time thinking, well, should I do this? Should I do that? Was that right? All of those things are super exhausting. So when you begin to cultivate the behavior of just I hadn't thought about that. Interesting. Okay. And then now when I look at myself, what do I think about that? Does that resonate with me? And if not, then I don't need to think about that anymore. If it
Mm,
does, then, okay, well, how can I play with this a little bit more? So that's kind of what that vessel is all about.
yeah.
And then if somebody wanted to dive into that experience a little bit more, then I've created something that's called the Phoenix Method. And the Phoenix, for those of you that haven't heard it or kind of vaguely remember what that is the Phoenix is an immortal being. So it's already starting in perfection. And that's how we start. Even if maybe you judge yourself, that I hold you as an immortal, perfect being that created exactly what they want. And then we go through discovering, typically those that are coming into this Phoenix method are women. We begin discovering what works for you, what doesn't work for you, all of those aspects. And essentially, by the time we end our program together, that you have begun to cultivate and step into a new identity, your new Phoenix form. So again, that myth is the immortal being is tired of its expression and it gets to change itself. It's immortal. So it goes and it creates a nest. It asks the sun to burn it to ashes.
Mm,
And out of those ashes, it rises up in its new immortal form. And it does that for however long it wants to. So some of us, I believe, we're going to do that once in our lives.
mm,
Others are going to or have already done it and they're not going to do anymore. And then there are those that are like myself that will go through this journey, this process of rebirth over and over and over and over. And so you get to find yourself there. Some people will find that they will do it once. Like I said, they'll go through this process with me, they'll understand it, they're going to be good. And others are going to learn the foundational requirements of what it takes to do this over and over and over and watch themselves grow into things that they can never even imagine when they began their life.
Oh, I do. I do. And it's so hard to explain to somebody, when you're this really wounded caterpillar that eventually someday you can become the butterfly. It's quite, I found it quite difficult for me when I was in those spaces to ever imagine that I could, be where I am today. And, you hit on something with your library that really caused me to, this affected me. I'm a grand reader of books, right? A books podcast, and I just completely like divulge myself into that. That's like my chocolate. But I reread books, and I put the month and the year on the inside flap of when I read it. And when I reread it differently because
Mhm.
I'm different. And so I love that some of the things that may not really resonate today in a book or a podcast or something that you're learning from tomorrow is going to mean something entirely different. And I love that your library is going to offer this to people. Is this something that they would have access to at their leisure to go back and read and learn from?
Yeah, so essentially we have set it out to where there's hashtags. So we all know how to use hashtags and such. So for example, if you're going through emotional challenges and you want to be inspired by all of the various different people who are telling their emotional wellness stories, then those are little hashtags that you can go through, and then all of the practices that are introduced. One of the things that I also didn't mention is there's Vedic wisdom, so that Eastern tradition. Those are things that
Mm,
pull forward as well, and sometimes seeing it through a new lens, as we talked
mm,
about. All of those things that you can use that tool forever,
yeah.
for however long. And then as that library grows, it's not that old yet, but as it grows, there will be more and more resources. And so,
Wow.
yeah, easier to extract the information, like going into one of a room in a library or, a particular, like, like this is all nonfiction and this is fiction, all
Mm,
of those types of things that you can explore it in the way that works best for you. Yeah. And
that
then
is so cool.
one of the things that we will do is reinvite or invite our experts that have lots and lots to say to come back and speak on it from a new angle, a new lens,
Mm,
to also show that when people are telling their stories, they're only telling a fraction of it. You know,
yeah.
you can't bring all of the wisdom out in,
Yeah.
15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour. No way.
Right. Right, right. And we all resonate differently with different just the way that people are, the way that they explain, the way that they resonate. We're all just so different, and so what I hear from one may not really strike me as much as the same message coming from this person might. So it's
Mhm.
really interesting. I love the mix. And that's exactly what I want to do here is to be able to do the same thing, to bring in experts that have so much to share, and I really appreciate this. If somebody wanted to, do you offer like a one-on-one coaching or group coaching?
Yeah, so I always would do one-on-one coaching if one
Yeah.
doesn't fit in one of the various different programs. And then that Phoenix method is a hybrid, so it is group. We pull
Mm,
in other individuals because I feel there is a lot of benefit for women in particular. We have become very isolated, and that's very masculine. Much of us
mm,
aren't geared for that masculine way of doing life in totality. It's okay for us. We have both parts inside of us. We have our masculine side, we have our feminine side. But when we go into our current mind and hang in on that masculine only is the best way, then there's a lot of health issues. So that particular one helps us come back to that state of community and organization and all of those aspects that really uplift us. It also helps us step into our transformation with much greater ease and beauty and grace because others
oh
they
yeah.
are supporting us doing that. Yeah, so that one also is it's my baby right now, so I'm super passionate about it. But yeah, the sky's the limit. That's the fun thing about taking somebody on this journey of exploration. It really
Yeah.
can take whatever form suits them best.
Wow. Yeah, that's so much power in that in the group. I 100% agree with that. And the isolation, 100% understand that as well. As we wrap up, and gosh, I could go on for days with you because I just learned so much. What would be if somebody were sitting here today and they're just kind of like, I am so desperately lonely. I'm so desperately unhappy. I don't know what to do or where even my direction or purpose is. What is something that you would share with them, that you would say to help them understand a little bit better?
Yeah, so I feel like if that's what you're experiencing is that loneliness and the confusion, that one of the best places to start is beginning to invite the relationship with yourself. Then that's something that we can do at any moment. We don't need to have the external. So sometimes we're in situations that we have to change first before they're going to change outside of us. So beginning to develop that relationship inside of ourselves, which is very safe,
Yeah.
we will I'm going to roll that one back. There was a thought that was going to come out of my mouth and it's not really true. So I'm going to not say it. But if we begin to reach to the part inside of us that is always, always working for our good, and we can simplify that in a very basic, mundane way, that there is a part of us, an inner intelligence that keeps our heart beating, and we don't have to think about that. There's a part of us that knows exactly how much oxygen to extract from the air that we breathe, and it brings it to the cells that are most important for our survival. So it knows what we need to get by. When we start giving ourselves to it and asking that part of ourselves to lead us towards greater and greater health, it has all the answers. And when we listen, we're going to know exactly where to go, what to do. So oftentimes people will say this as a higher power, but it doesn't have to be. If you don't resonate with that, it doesn't have to be. It's just the mechanism that is always there healing and keeping your body functioning, which when you understand what what am I looking for? Natural healing sciences is pretty amazing in our world that we're all still living and we do all of these things that don't help our physical body at all. So when you understand how amazing and powerful that essence of who you are inside of you and you begin reaching for it, that really is the key.
Oh man. Yeah, that is such a level of beauty. I love I love that. I love that. It is just so incredibly like so grateful, I think is the best word when we really can understand. That's huge. Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate that. And I really want to make sure that we include all of your links in this in this show because like, access to your book, to the library, to the Phoenix method, to working with you, like I'm so appreciative of you sharing yourself and your knowledge. And thank you so very much.
Well, thank you, Anne. It's always a pleasure and a joy to spend time with you because, I feel like we're kindred spirits, your story and journey of transformation is so beautiful and so, well, it does exactly what we're talking about here, that you gave yourself to yourself multiple times and recreated yourself over and over again, and probably will continue to.
Yeah, yeah, it's so cool. It is so incredibly cool. There's no accident that I met you. Yeah, kindred spirits, 1,000%. I'm so grateful. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much. And you have a great day.
You as well.
All righty.